Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speak in support of the legislation. Ladies and gentlemen, last week is the first time in my 16 years of serving here that I was unable to attend session over a prolonged period of time. I'd like to thank leadership and every member of this body for your understanding of knowing what myself and my family are dealing with due to the tornado that struck us at home. I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the residents of South Christian, myself and my family, and for all of those individuals that live in areas that were impacted by these storms. Thank you to our first responders, to our utility workers from both here in Kentucky and those from outside the state who came in to help get our utilities back going. Thank you to our local government officials. Thank you to the governor and his administration. Thank you to the leader, to the Speaker of the House, and to the leadership who stayed in contact with me during the time span after December 11th and were asking me questions of what they might be able to do to help in our community. But most importantly, I'd like to say thank you to the volunteers who came together after these storms, who helped clean debris, clean up damage, and most importantly, they helped lift our spirits during a time that each of us felt devastated. These individuals came from within the areas where we live, from all over the eastern United States. Last week I had individuals from Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and New York State working in my backyard, helping clean up debris, doing what they felt was their Christian duty to help us in a time like that. I'd like to share with you my experience of what happened in the early morning hours of December 11th when that storm ravaged my community. At about 10 minutes after 12 a.m., our phones went off at our house. My wife and I got up. We got our granddaughter who was spending the weekend with us, who many of you here, members of this body, have met. We made sure that my wife's 93-year-old mother, who lives with us, that we had her in a safe, secure location. And then my wife and I set our granddaughter between us and both wrapped our arms around her. And we prayed. When you hear descriptions of a tornado, I've always heard you're going to hear a freight train. I never heard a freight train when that storm hit. I heard wind, rain, breaking glass. Our house shook and shuddered. And all during this time, I want to say how proud I am of my wife and granddaughter who stayed strong, a 9-year-old who stayed strong through this storm. My wife who held on to her to make sure she was safe. The one blessing in our family, my wife's mother who lives with us suffers from dementia. To this day, she has no idea, no recollection that anything ever happened. But I know the other day during committee meeting, the gentleman from Grays mentioned that his granddaughter was drawing pictures of a tornado. My granddaughter, if she sees a weather report on TV or she hears a clap of thunder, if she sees the weather report on TV that shows red, she asks, is there another storm coming? This little one's going to experience this for the rest of her life. But they're strong. After the storm passed, when things quieted down, the first thing my wife and I did, we grabbed our cell phones and we checked on our neighbors. We checked on our next door neighbors who were safe. Our neighbors who live across the street from us live in a double-wide trailer. And all I could hear outside was the flapping of plastic. I had no idea what I was hearing was a tarp, a large tarp that came from the Christian County Granary, which is located south of me, that the wind had blown into the trees. My thought was that trailer's gone and that family of 4 are gone. But we did get a hold of them. They were safe. Why we were all spared while others lost their lives, I have no idea. All that myself and my family, and I'm sure everyone else can do, is offer our prayers to those who lost loved ones, who lost everything during these tornadoes. I have one family from Pembroke who lost loved ones when the storm hit Bowling Green. But as I said, we continue to offer our prayers to everyone that has been impacted by this devastating storm. When the light finally broke that morning, we could see outside and see what had happened at our house. In our yard, there were 14 large trees. There are now 4 remaining. The same in our neighbors. We saw where their homes were, roofs were blown off, but not completely gone. As I said, for some reason we were spared. We had damage that can be repaired. And I was thankful when my wife called me yesterday morning at 8 o'clock, and she said there was hammering going on our roof because they were replacing our roof at my house. If you want to know what really lifts your spirits during a time like this, anyone that would have been in our community that day and would have seen the number of people that came out that helped cut trees, cut tree limbs, help remove debris from people's yards. They were doing that out of the kindness of their hearts. That following Sunday, there was a young mother from Oak Grove who had her 6-year-old son there in Pembroke. And I asked her, why are you here doing this? And she said, I want my son to know what it's like to give back, because there could be a day that this is our home. Things are beginning to get back to normal at our house. As I said, we're very We're very fortunate to know that what happened to us can be repaired, can be rebuilt. As I said, for those others who have lost loved ones or have lost everything, you'll be in my prayers continuously, in my family's prayers, because we do understand or have a slight understanding of some of what you've dealt with. With this legislation, it's important to have this initial funding coming through. As I mentioned, with our children that have lived through this experience, to know there's funding there to help them towards mental health. Because these kids are going to be living with this for a very long time. It's also important that we have a semblance of oversight of this money, and that it's not all put out at one time, because for those of us who represent the areas that were impacted by the storm, we're getting phone calls. I had a young mother call me yesterday who, when she initially filed her claim for a heating and cooling unit that had turned upside down, the unit could not be repaired. It was no longer being manufactured, and they couldn't get parts. She was contacted by a firm that came out to look at the unit, but she didn't know who they were or where they were coming from. We're sure after she contacted her insurance agent, they were actually coming to make sure the damage was right, but she was scared to death, afraid that she had done something wrong. I have another close friend of mine that I grew up with in Pembroke who has an unnumbered total of trees that are laying down in the back. Around probably 40 other homes. So as we move through this, there are going to be individuals that will need our help. With our local governments, who will see a decrease in tax revenue in these areas that have been devastated because businesses and homes have been totally destroyed. We're going to need to be able to help them as well as our school districts. But in doing all of this, as I said, it will be important for us as a body to be an asset to make sure that we get these dollars to where they're needed as quickly as possible. And for that reason, I urge this body to vote in support of House Bill 5. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.